Welcome back, Lucasen. In European, you said bureaucrats play very crucial role and also politician. So
Much more so than politicians.
I see.
Just to give you an example of the power of bureaucrats, lobbyists target policymakers, administrative personnel 9 out of 10 times, and only in 10% of the time the lobbyists target the actual politicians. So
I
that
see.
should already tell enough about where long-term power really resides.
So I mean, if they play too much role in the government, so there is no system in European government to change or to replace bureaucrats.
Because in the United States, you have a presidential system. And if the party wins the elections, they bring their own administrative personnel with them, like the Democrats and the Republicans. But in the European system, they evolved from monarchies. So in the Netherlands, we still have a monarchy. So that has a different evolution. Alexis de Tocqueville writes also a lot about that in Democracy in America, because either the king had the power or the parliament had the power. So whenever there was like a big social issue coming up that required urgent policy making, that required urgent political action, then the king had basically the choice to either give more power to parliament or to give more power to the administrative executive. Same thing goes from the politicians, right? Whenever there was a pressing social issue that required urgent policymakers, then the politician had the option to either delegate it to the monarch to do it or to delegate it to the executive bureaucrat to do it, right? So both have an incentive to make the bureaucracy stronger and to try and give faith to the public officials. And in the Dutch, we also have a verzuiled constitution, which basically means a pillarized constitution across different ideologies, liberal, socialist, Protestant, and Catholic, that it was impossible to create basically policies that served each and every group at the same time. So they always had to mediate, and they went through a bureaucratic system. So the pillarized constitution also gave the public officials way more power than in many other countries.
I see. So it means you say US is better in terms of check and balance because every 4 year there are new
Yeah,
administration, new
yeah,
executive, so they can at
absolutely.
least they can change bureaucrats.
Before you were talking about European government, and I already wanted to interject at that point because officially there is no European government. The European Commission is not a government, it's a commission. It has specifically, in theory, in theory, the European Commission has a specific delineated amount of tasks where it executes policy on. The European Parliament is not a real parliament in the sense that they can approve or disapprove the budget. But instead of disapproving the budget, they just give millions and millions of amendments every year. But it's then up to the Commission to interpret these amendments. So what often happens is that the European Parliament approves many amendments just so that politicians can make a statement. Oh, look, I'm active for children. Look, I'm active for disabled. I'm active for endangered animals. Yay, look at my amendments. I got my amendment passed. Yay. But then so many amendments get passed just because that politician is interested in making a statement for their constituency. But the coherence of all of these different amendments, that's not done by the parliament. So the parliament accepts often amendments that directly contradict each other because they just vote them in batches. They vote. I was a policy advisor, so it was my job to make these voting lists. They vote thousands of batches of amendments at the same time, often directly contradicting each other, just so that the politicians can tell their constituency, look, I stood up for your interests. I got these motions and amendments approved. Well, no motions, but amendments. And then it's up to the European Commission to interpret these amendments. Yeah. So in the end, the European Commission isn't directly elected. Basically, Merkel and Macron decided, you know what, we put Ursula von der Leyen there. Yeah.
I
And
see.
before that, there was Van Rompuy and so on. And there is, or Barroso, there is no democratic mandate for the European Commission. And the democratic control doesn't really exist because the European Parliament never disapproves the budget. They're only pushing different amendments to make statements to their own constituencies. There is no central scrutiny of European policy. It does not exist. It's pure technocracy.
I see. So you want to say European democracy is backsliding, or it's become deteriorating, or because
Yes.
some group, like some bureaucrat or some politician, are dictating some position in European government, European parliament. Some people are dictating for very long times. It seems like that in Europe nobody can check and balance using democracy system.
Well, of course, if you talk to mainstream academics like my former colleagues at the Radboud University Nijmegen and other institutions, they will say, well, there is a balance of power because we had government of CDA, now we have government of D66, and or the government of PvdA and VVD. So there are different elites which have different preferences, different priorities, and they alternate power. Yeah, that's what my left wing opponents would say because the mainstream, that's what the mainstream would say. Yeah, there's different political powers, different political parties, and so it rotates a bit, and so you see they have different priorities. But I would say no, don't listen to the lies that your mainstream friends tell you. They're lying to your face because they have a cushy job at the government where their salaries are paid by taxpayers and they have stability of income, they have social prestige, and they don't want to lose it. And therefore, they are prepared to spread lies because they're living a lie. And their entire socioeconomic position is built upon that lie. And it will only get worse because, as I said, these policies destroy hard production, they destroy spheres of employment where you still have your boots on the ground, where you're interacting with direct, hard, immediate reality. Those kind of jobs become harder to do because of regulation, because of
So
substances with,
you
and
want
you
to
get
say,
more corporate jobs, you get more management jobs, you get more soft jobs, you get more services, you get more human resource managers. That's what you get back from it. So you outsource the hard economy where people are in direct relationship with reality and have a direct rapport with reality, and you replace it by more bureaucrats and human resource managers. So this problem is only going to get worse because they accelerate themselves in their own groupthink. Their own bubble filter only becomes stronger. So basically, socialism is the religion you get when you lose your religion. And after socialism comes Islam. We've seen that in Iran. The left thought they could make a deal with the Islamists. Well, tough luck because the Islamists took over, destroyed the leftists, and now then we got the regime that we have now in Iran. Yeah, the same will happen in Europe. The leftists think that they can make a compromise with the Islamists, but in the end, the Islamists are just more harder, and they will just replace them also demographically. And in the end, Europe goes from Christian to left-wing secular to Muslim. That's what happens. That's what I analyze in my book.
I see.
Do the people still have any influence? Because yeah, we have already seen that the core doctrine of the state that runs the political process is pure bureaucracy, guided by some melange of leftist utopian sentiments. That's basically the core of the power in Europe is a bureaucratic class with a melange of leftist utopian ideas spread onto it. Yeah, that is the
And
core of the political power.
you want to
And then you
say,
can say, well, if people are Christian or Muslim or whatever, it doesn't have any influence anymore because this march continues. But Islam are prepared to use violence, and that will change things because Christians are like, oh, I turn the other cheek, and my kingdom is not of this world, and Lord forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Yeah, that's Christianity. But Islam has a different story. Islam has its own laws. Islam has its own Sharia, its own penal code, its own manual on how to wage war. So Islam is going to be an entirely different story for this bureaucratic class to deal with. And if you want to understand that, it's a very good book I recommend, written by Ibn Khaldun, the Mukaddima. He talks about group solidarity. And once groups start to exist with tribal solidarity, then the system can no longer control and contain them. And then these systems take over. Yeah. Different tribes emerge. And that's also a chapter that I have in my book, What the World Can Learn from the Fall of the West. I also have a chapter on the emergence of tribes. That's where we're headed in the West. The
oh,
West is now going
so
to see.
You want to say
Yeah.
European politics most right wing Christian strong based politics or most
Yeah, but
left
they have
wing?
no power because they don't control the state apparatus.
I
That's
see.
the thing. Yeah, sure, you have big nationalist movements, you have a lot of mainstream right wing Christian parties in Europe, but most of them don't have actual political power because we've seen that the commun's opinion, what the opinion of people think in the street, is entirely cut off from the policies that are rolled out in practice, right?
I see.
The real power, as I said, is with a machinery of what we would call a deep state. In essence, a bureaucratic
Democrat.
network of public officials that don't face democratic scrutiny, that don't ever are elected and cannot be fired. You can't get rid of them through elections, and they have basically this balts, this virtue signaling of an ideology of a melange of left wing multiculturalist utopian ideas. Yeah, and if you are part of that elite circle, then you are not allowed to criticize these ideas or to think critically about them because then you are pushed out of that clique, as we've seen with Maarten Boudry as the living example of that.
I
But that's
see.
not really policymakers; that's the academics. But yeah, you have if you want to be part of this social upper class, the bovenbouw, as Marx would say it, if you want to be part of that, then you have to adhere to that ideology, or at least you cannot criticize it publicly.
I see. So
So it becomes its own wheel that enforces itself. So the young generation that's already lined up to replace them, they are imbibed with the same kind of ideological melange, and the whole thing just continues.
so
That's why I moved to South America, because I don't see a way, unless the people rise up in the streets massively, which I don't think they're going to do. This will not change.
so
This
you
will not
you
change.
you want to elaborate, you are elaborating Europe has emerging some kind of class, some kind of a group of class. Those are bureaucrat class. So
Yeah, bureaucrat,
they are controlling
administrative bureaucrat class. Yeah,
they are controlling everything, every
yes,
politics or any
yes.
financial
And they
economy.
probably don't even realize it themselves. But sometimes they do. There was one example, they probably don't even realize that they have this power because it is a mechanism that functions on a collective scale where the actual intentions of the individual don't really have that much pull anymore. It becomes an autonomous dynamic. That's very important to realize also. But one example from the corona crisis, because in the corona crisis, the citizens made use of transparency laws, and that meant that the government had to give their sources open to the citizens to read. And the email correspondences of public servants had to be open to the public to read. And there were public servants who said literally, yeah, I use these sentences and they are so vague and they can be used in any context and they can be used to answer any critical question from parliament. And I'm so proud I came up with this sentence. That's literally what public servants said, that they were proud that they created such ambiguous sentences that they could use to answer questions so that they wouldn't really have give a real answer. That they were complementing each other on that. That's how they answered the scrutiny from the democratic authorities.
You see, so you identify there are a group of class that is bureaucrat
Yes.
class in Europe is emerging nowadays, and they control everything. They control
Yes.
politics, they all control finance, they control economy, everything, social
Yes.
welfare, and even
Maybe there are some things that are not controlled by that. For instance, if I organize, let's say, a card game with my friends in a store, then maybe that is not controlled yet by that class. But the moment I try to make it big and I try to advertise it and I try to get societal traction for it, then yeah, I have to conform to that kind of regulation in the end.
I
So
say,
that's also how they control the right wing, right? By keeping it small, by allowing things but keeping them small. That's the new way of controlling things now. Not
and
repressing it immediately or directly, but basically allowing them to do their thing, but using the algorithms to make sure that only a very small group of people get to see it and to make sure that it doesn't get any social relevance. And that's why your friend, I wouldn't call someone like that a friend, but let's say that's why she said, "Oh, but don't listen to Lucas. Don't listen to it." So yeah, sure, they allow their enemies, they allow them to say what they want to say, but they try to marginalize them and try to prevent them from gaining societal traction. And that is so frustrating, because it would be a direct suppression, and you would have a more clear cause for revolt or for rebellion. But nowadays it goes through asymmetric, intransparent algorithms that decide the public discussion.
I see.
They can't.
Politicians are supporting bureaucrat, and the
Yes,
the
exactly as George
monarchy
Soros predicted.
the
That's a
monarchy
very,
are
yeah.
blessing bureaucrats. So bureaucrats
Yes,
are
pleasing bureaucrats. Yes.
very, very special class in Europe, and they are
This is literally what happened, John. Let me give you this example. So you had Geert Wilders. Maybe you've heard about him. He's this nationalist, anti-Muslim politician that's very famous in the whole world because of so many death threats, and they try to send people from Pakistan every year to kill him to the Netherlands. It's really bad. But even he won the election like 4 years ago, and he was the biggest. And his right hand was Fleur Agema, who had the same opinion as Geert Wilders. His right hand joined the cabinet. And then she was interrogated by Parliament, and she literally said, well, I know that when I was serving in Parliament, I had different opinions and I expressed different opinions. But now that I'm part of the governing class, now I get my instructions from NATO and the NCTV, which is the Dutch Secret Intelligence Service. So let me rephrase what that means to me. Why I'm so happy, John, that we can have this conversation. Because as I said, the only way forward for me is to bring my vision and my analysis to the rest of the world, to Asia, to the United States, to get the rest of the world to talk about it. Because in the most ideal situation for me as a writer and philosopher, let's say that Geert Wilders would read this book and say, wow, this is a brilliant book. I'm going to make this book a cornerstone for policy for my political party when I get to the power. But the thing is, even if Geert Wilders or other politicians, it doesn't even matter which politicians, even if politicians say, oh, that's a good book, you want to translate that book into policy, by the time they actually become part of the executive, they run into the same problem again, that they get instructions from intelligence agency, from transnational authorities, let's say the World Health Organization, European Union, NATO, United Nations, all sort of sustainable development goals. They're not even the ones making policy anymore. They are the ones pleasing bureaucrats. And that's why if I want to have influence, then I must make sure that people like J.D. Vance or Joe Rogan or Nigel Farage or Tommy Robinson, who also posed with the book, by the way, who received the book, is very happy with it. That if I want to have influence, even if I influence Dutch politicians, it doesn't matter, because once these politicians become part of the executive, they follow instructions from non-democratic bodies. Yeah. So if I want to have influence, I must go international. I must speak to academics internationally. I must speak to Korea. I must speak to Brazil. That's the way forward for me to be relevant, to actually be able to do my work as a philosopher.
I see. So I mean, you identify about European situation. The bureaucrats are emerging nowadays, and they control everything. And even
Mhm.
elected MP, they cannot remove bureaucrat. Even the king and queen
Yeah.
monarchy
Even the king and the
cannot
queen can't remove a
remove the
bureaucrat.
bureaucrat. And bureaucrat,
Yeah,
nobody can touch
nobody
bureaucrat.
can do it.
And
Their
bureaucrat,
positions are so strong in the
right,
constitution. It goes back to this pillarized constitution, the
right.
constitution of the Verzuiling. It goes back to that. They
that
can't
that
get rid of that.
that's you have to find other way. I mean, how to check and balance about bureaucrat, which nobody can able to touch. They don't want. They were not there to touch bureaucrat in Europe. So bureaucrat are above everything.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, above everything. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So,
above everything. That's literally how it is.
and what about academicians, or all institutions are also the same in line with the
Yeah,
bureaucrat? They have to
yeah,
follow bureaucrat in
yeah,
Europe.
yeah. Because else they get no subsidy. They have to, else they get no subsidy.
So university has to obey bureaucrat in Europe.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
has to.
they will not get subsidy, and they will
Yeah,
not get any funding or contract or
yeah,
anything opposing.
exactly. Yes,
They were lost, right? So,
exactly. Yes.
so then in that context, academic will be also, uh, they were
Yeah,
it is
hopeless.
it is a kind of corruption under bureaucrat system.
I agree.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of corruption, and nobody can able to challenge bureaucracy in Europe. So that is a new, very significant situation in Europe, as you point out.
That was a narrative that goes back to this natural solidarity that existed in Christian Europe post Second World War. But that's destroyed now. Now it's every man for himself. It's cultural fragmentation. It's atomism. People feel estranged from the public culture. They just want to be in their house and watch Netflix. That's it. They don't want to pay for all that stuff anymore. They want to keep money for themselves and spend it on themselves.
I
Yeah. So
mean,
now the government comes in with climate taxes, CO2 taxes, so that the
welfare.
bureaucracy can keep expanding and expanding. That's where it comes. It's in your own interest because you don't want a climate disaster to happen, now do
I
you?
mean,
Right?
welfare state.
Look, here's the thing about the welfare state. You're right. You have to pay much taxes. You have to pay taxes for welfare state, for the immigration, for the climate policies. There's more and more things you are getting taxed for. Now for the war, the so-called freedom tax, as they call it. So people are going to escape from that system. The tax burden is too high and it disincentivizes being economically productive. So if you have a talent that you can employ abroad, you're going to move. More and more people are going to flee Europe. Flee while you can. Most people who have something that they can transport, they're going to transport it. So what's going to happen? The motor of the economy will leave the body, and what will remain is people working for the government. They get their money paid no matter what, so they have an incentive to just like the ostrich, to bury their head in the sand and well, I get my money every month, so I don't want to engage with this counter narrative. And then the people who live from welfare accounts and who are dependent on the government and they can't go because they don't have mobility. They have very low mobility. The people with high mobility are usually the most economically productive, the most versatile personalities. They are the first to go. The most entrepreneurial, versatile
Businessmen
personalities. The people who leave will then compete to said
underperform
it is a
energy.
landscape that benefits a few of the big players that are privileged to operate in a landscape catered to their functioning. Right? Because Norway is in the unique position that it sits on so much natural oil. And what they did is that they have all this natural oil and they created an investment funds from that the people benefit from. That's why Norway is so filthy rich, because they have all this oil and they created an investment company for investing the money they get from it. But in Europe, in the Netherlands, because Norway is not part of the European Union, because if they were, the European Union would lay claim to their funds and their income and try to regulate and tax it. That's why Norway is not in the European Union. In the Netherlands, we have natural wells of gas, yeah, that could make us so much money, but we didn't do it. We spent the gas on left-wing projects, as I said, proefballonnetjes, leuke dingen voor linkse mensen. As Joop den Uyl said it, so nice things for left-wing people. That's what they sent it on. They had no structural investment for the Dutch gas well, and now they just plugged them with concrete. So now they can't even get to the gas anymore. Even though we're having war in Russia and in Iran, which drives up the fuel prices like insane, Dutch government chooses to destroy its own natural gas wells, or at least make them inaccessible. Yeah, that's what bureaucrats are doing now. It's not a recipe for decline, it's a recipe for collapse, John. I mean it. The fall, you can interpret it as like autumn, as part of the life cycle of the civilization as an organism, but the fall also means the collapse. And the policies the bureaucrats have set in motion are recipes for collapse. Having a fully capitalist system where all the money is spent on very short-lived investments, or you have more of a social democrat system where at least some smart things are done with the money, like Norway creating a collective pool for investment funds for its own people, then I guess the second part is better. Right? What Norway has done is probably better. But here's the thing, though. We are run by bureaucrats with left-wing predispositions, so they're probably not going to do smart things either. If they were really smart, they would have nuclear energy already. They would have ramped up nuclear energy in Germany and in the Netherlands and in Belgium, as they did in France, right? But they didn't, and now they're dependent on oil from God knows where, because they're at war with Russia and they're at war with Iran. Good luck, my friends. Good luck. Good luck taxing yourself out of wealth during an energy crisis.
you've been strongly emphasized about bureaucrats. So
Yeah.
bureaucrat emerging in Europe and bureaucrat class are controlling everything. Probably
Yes.
those bureaucrats, as you point out, bureaucrats are not doing good job probably, and they are pro left wing as uh, bureaucrat controlling Europe. Can you
And
say?
even if they were Christian, they are trapped in a system with an autonomous dynamic that they are, on an individual level, unable to put their Christian principles into any tangible social result.
So that is a problem among bureaucrats, right? They are even most of them are Christian or they are not Christian among bureaucrats.
No, most not. No, most not.
So you
Some, but most not. Some, but
I
most not.
see. Among bureaucrats, you said only some are Christian believer and most are not normal. They are normal Christian believer and they are controlling Europe and many
Yeah.
European countries that become left wing and left wing leaning
Yeah.
government.
And even if they were sincerely, deeply believing Christians, they are stuck in a system which has its own autonomous dynamic, which does not give them any space to translate those Christian life preferences into any political social result.
Right. So it means in terms of religious perspective, Europe declining, the bureaucrat class are emerging.
Even the churches are nowadays demonizing the right-wing politicians, right? So the people who stand up for like the common people who have all the disadvantages, people who can't find houses anymore because there's no houses on the market anymore, like the nationalists who stand up for these kind of people are being demonized by the church, right? So even the church has become now a far left institution at this point, right?
I see.
So that's it's pretty hopeless. It's pretty hopeless, John.
I see. So European society is supposed to be Christian society, but European societies decline. Christian faith, Christian believers are declining in European society, as well
Mhm.
as among bureaucrats in Europe. They are mostly not no more believe in Christian. They control European country, each country, and they are destroying the country in many
Yeah,
cases. And
yeah. It would in demographic sense, in economic sense, yeah, we can outright say that they are destroying the country. We're not lying, we're not exaggerating, but yeah, in terms of the economic policies, the real businesses are leaving, energy becomes unaffordable, economic growth becomes unaffordable, while the immigration pressure continues, which makes life harder for common people and makes social services more difficult to access and more hardly burdened. Yeah. So yeah, we are not exaggerating. Well, at least we're saying demographically and economically, the bureaucratic class is destroying Europe. We are not exaggerating. We can outright say that, and it is not a conspiracy. It's not a lie. It is so. Yes.
so it means Europe need a lot of Christian believer, Christian faithful.
Resonates with Christian instincts to stand up for the underdog, to turn the other cheek, to make yourself humble, that suffering and masochism, as Christ suffered on the cross, that it's necessary to bear suffering for others. Yeah, jezelf wegcijferen and so on. So these ideas resonate also so well in the specific Western cultural context because they resonate well with Christian intuitions. This stuff is not happening in Japan. This stuff is not happening in Turkey. This stuff is not happening in Israel. Yeah? It's happening in cultures with a Christian, especially Protestant Christian foundation. That's where it's happening because these culture Marxist intuition glue so well with the Christian intuitions.
Right, but Europe is declining Christian faith, so that is
Yes.
big challenges, and many bureaucrats are also nobody can check and balance, and the king monarchy they cannot make check and balance bureaucrat. They instead blessing bureaucrat and the politician
Yeah.
elected MP. They could not able to check and balance. They instead
Mhm.
support bureaucrats. So the only
Yeah.
check and balance you can do bureaucracy in Europe is stronger Christian faith and stronger believers from the European
But you need
society.
political power. In
That
Hong
that
Kong, people had faith, but they had
that
no power and they lost.
Christian
Eh,
faith, you will become political power too, because you lost, you don't have Christian faith, strong Christian faith, so you neither have political power or any power because your foundation is losing, your Christian faith is losing.
as
So
as I
that's the
as I
thing.
say as I say in the book, the bureaucrats try to rule everything. They try to control everything, create a surveillance state. But at the end, it's people will create their own tribes. Like the Protestants create their own tribes, the Christians create their own tribes, the Muslims create their own tribes, and that's where this faith will then flourish. It will flourish within small, decentralized communities. That's what I think. In small tribes, that's where faith will flourish.
Right.
Yeah, but not with the bureaucrats, not with the controllers, not with the citadel. That's not where it's going to flourish.
They will
Those are going
not
to
do.
remain technocrat, autocrat surveillance states.
Right. Bureaucrat will not do. So you need the society should be empowered against Christian faith should be empowered among society and improve Christian faith and to make increase in Christian faith.
Going back to the point of faith, well, in Hong Kong, I always give the example of Hong Kong. There were hundreds of thousands of people protesting the Chinese government there. But at the end of the day, the government won because they had the power. And even if the cause of the people was noble and just, and they had the treaty on their side that the Chinese government had signed with the British, and they had the democracy on their side, and they had liberalism on their side, and they had all the freedom, they had all the good causes. Like the Hong Kong demonstrators had like freedom from the surveillance state, living up to the treaty that they had signed, democratic autonomy. They had all the noble, all the lofty goals and arguments were on the side of the demonstrators, of the protesters. But they
Right.
were completely crushed, and now they are forced into a social credit system. Same with Christianity. Now in Syria, they had this fragile balance under Assad. That a few Christians here, they had a few Sunnis there, and so on, and then they balanced the whole thing. And Alawites they had also, but now it's just boom, Islam takes over, crushes the Christians, right? The Netherlands is overcrowded. We
Right.
don't have houses, and we have
Muslim.
all these nitrogen laws that don't allow us to build new houses. There are so many problems, and
Right.
even if we could build the houses, then we have to compete with enormous infrastructure projects hosted by the German government. That means that the pool of laborers to recruit from is shrinking down. And even if we wanted and had the legal freedom to build these houses, which we don't, we wouldn't have the personnel to even build them. So the last thing we need is more immigrants to Europe. I left because I'm a doctor, and I wrote so many books. Here, I'm gonna show you here. I have a page in the books that shows these
Because
are all the books that I've written, and here on the other page is like the essay collections that I wrote with others is in here, right? So despite me being a doctor, having written all these books, I can't afford a normal house in the Netherlands. It's just impossible for me. So I had to move to South America. And I suspect that more people will follow my lead. So good luck importing more people to the Netherlands trying to fix your problem. There's not even space for the people. People are living in cars now. People
you
with
know,
full-time jobs are living in cars now because there's no house. Not just beggars and shit, but actually people with degrees and with employment are now living in cars and caravans because they're in garden sheds because there is no space. You just have to mimic left-wing ideas. And you keep repeating that, then you get some bureaucrat job, and then you're fine, and then you become part of the system, and you get paid by taxes and by printing money. Yeah, that's how it goes.
I mean,
If you the
even
deugdballs,
even you
if you
have
virtue
family.
signal enough, then you will get some corporate job, and then you
I
can do
mean,
that for until the
even
collapse. That's how it goes. You have
even
to sell
you
your soul, though. You have to sell your full integrity to do that. But yeah, then you can. And whenever there's like a break or a lunch, you have to talk about gay rights, and you have to talk about anti-Muslim discrimination, and you have to talk about the necessity of more action for climate. And if you do that, then yeah, then you can keep your job. Yeah, and then you get paid by the government until the whole thing collapses. That's the prospect for a normal guy who wants to set up a family in the Netherlands. Yeah, sure, you can make money and then you can go abroad where your money is worth more and you can live a better life there. But if you wait for too long, well, your money loses value anyway because of inflation. Prices go up elsewhere in the world also, like here in Paraguay, things are also getting more expensive slowly but surely. Not super fast, but slowly but surely things are getting more expensive. And I just hope that countries that join the eurozone, like Bulgaria, that they don't do the crazy stupid shit that the Netherlands and Germany have done, and that they can keep the value of the euro afloat. That's what I hope. I hope that the younger members of the euro currency union, that they don't do the same ridiculous policies as West Europe has done, and that they are the ones who can keep the value of the euro afloat. This is what I hope. I am now for expanding the currency union. I was always very critical of expanding the currency union, but I'm for put more countries in the eurozone. Sure, they can never be as stupid and ridiculous as the Netherlands and Germany are doing things, right? So maybe then my money can still keep a bit of its value. That's what I hope. Yeah, I changed my
Well,
policy on that. I'm now for expanding the currency union. I was always against that, but I'm like, no, let these people come in and let them work and let them try to keep the value of my coin up. That's how I'm thinking now. If you don't sell your soul to the system, yeah, sell your soul to Satan, then you can't have a family in Europe. That's how it is, because you won't have a house. Houses cost 500,000 euro. Yeah. So you have to sell your soul to the system and shut your mouth, not speak up, keep your opinions about Islam, everything, and transgender flags and vaccinations and all these stuff that Christians don't like. You have to shut your mouth. So all these Christians that you talk about, they live in a deception of their self. Yeah. They live in a falsification of themselves because they all shut their mouths to have their jobs. They need their money to sustain their family, and they participate in a totalitarian system where they are the ones controlling each other. Yeah. If they all spoke out at the same time, then something might change, but they don't because they want to keep their job, they want to keep their money, and they sell their souls instead of sticking to their principles and their integrity. And I am a man who stand up for the truth. In that sense, I am a prophet. All my analyses came true. You can read my book back from 2015, Avondland de Identiteit. Everything in that book came true. Yeah? And I stood behind my principles. I stood behind my beliefs. And that's why the elite tries to basically give me, make my life as difficult as they can, especially in the universities where I've been educated to do. Yeah? I was a professor at University Nijmegen. And they made it difficult for me. I gave lectures there. They pushed me out. They wanted to make it impossible for me to have the resources to sustain a family because I stood up for my truth and for the things I saw and for the clarity of my conscience. And if there is a God, then God endowed me with faculty of reason, of using my mind, and I'm using my mind, and I speak out about the things I say, and I make analysis, and people can't overthrow the analysis because they're based on truth. Yeah. So that's the truth. And if you want to support me, you can go to my BackMe channel, www.sitlucas.backme.com, and you can support me.
okay.
Yeah. The exact other way around. All those peoples
Okay.
with their families and their jobs and all that, they are the ones selling their souls to the system, not
Okay.
me. I stood to my clarity of conscience and I paid the price for it. Yeah. That's the
Okay.
truth, John. And when you
Okay.
stand for
So
Jesus, tell them that because
great,
that's the truth.
great.
Anything else I would tell them would be a lie.
Okay, Lucas, have a good night.
Thank you very much, John.